Tonight, we're going to talk about money. So perhaps the smile might last a little longer, or it might not come at all. Well, ever since I left college, and I have to admit that's been a few years ago, I've had a serious respect for earning a decent living and taking care of my family, putting a roof over their heads, getting cars that don't break down, buying some new clothes from time to time when the seasons changed, and even taking a vacation. That is, when my employer would let me take some time off. And when those raises came, I'd dash home and tell Janet, "Hey, I got a raise. Maybe we can buy that new couch we were looking at." The math was pretty simple. Look at your gross pay, pull out some, forms for taxes and figure I got to pay that, cover Social Security, Medicare, all those things the government wants to extract from my check, and then try to enjoy my take-home pay. When the raise came, I'd add that additional 5% and start living the dream. Well, sadly, like a lot of things, a raise today isn't what it used to be. With inflation climbing like a scared squirrel up a tree, unless you get a really big raise, you're actually going in reverse. All of that because of inflation. And I'm trying to think how to address Janet now. Hey, I just got a 5% raise, but that inflation is up 9%. So with that raise, we have less spendable income than we had last year. Sorry about that, but maybe the couch won't happen. Perhaps we get a new blanket over at Walmart to pull over the hole that the dogs chewed in the couch. Well, you can always use the credit card, but the interest rate on those is over 20% in some cases. So if you buy the couch and don't pay it right away, guess what? That $900 couch could end up costing $1,800 by the time we actually pay it off and then own it. And who knows if the dogs might take a bite out of that one too. Remember when James Carville said, "It's the economy, stupid"? Well, in a moment, we're going to open up the microphone for this wise man in the vertical box next to me. His name is Joel Griffith. He's from the Heritage Foundation. He does understand how all of this works. He's got some ideas on how to make it better for all of us. Not just trying to talk about what's happening in the big picture of the country, but what's happening in your household. Inflation is up 20%, real wages down 2%, house prices record highs, mortgages out of reach for a lot of people. At the root of this unaffordable economy is the price of energy. As a country, we were self-sufficient when Donald Trump was in office, and gas at the pump was in the $2 to $3 range, depending on the gas taxes in your state. Well, now, I don't have to tell you, it's far higher. And of course, everything is dependent on oil. Even if it's taken from the factor on a train or a plane, eventually, it's going to be on a truck by the time it gets to your house, and it's going to cost, depending on the cost of energy. Joel Griffith is with the Heritage Foundation. Joel, it's great to have you here, and let's jump into this. How far are we behind, and what does it take to get back where we should be and need to be?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me tonight, Governor. And if we're talking about for typical families, these are the most destructive economic circumstances we've seen for most families in more than 40 years now. And you referenced a second ago the fact that we've had inflation now totally 20% the past few years. If you're a typical middle-income family with two incomes, that's about a $5,000 annual decline in real wages. And that's not even taking into account the rising consumer costs. We've got credit card debt at all-time highs. If you factor in the increase in credit card debt with the increase in interest rates on that debt, the typical family is spending another $1,000 extra a year just on the interest on their credit cards. And then you add to that the mortgage costs. Typical mortgage on a median priced home is nearly $3,000 a month right now. And you add in property taxes, that's about double where it was just a few years ago. So $5,000 a year pay cut plus the rising mortgage costs and revolving debt. These are dire circumstances for families. And to resolve this problem, it means that politicians, both Democrat and Republican, need to be honest about how we got in this situation and actually propose some solutions.
Well, you just hit the magic button there. You said politicians need to be honest. I think that's an oxymoron. How is that ever going to happen? So if they're not going to be honest, we're going to have to get the information from guys like you. And let's talk about what exactly has happened and how energy's played such a big role, because that's what we started there. You mentioned it. Um, the cost of energy affects everything. It's not just how much it costs to get to and from work, but anything we order, the cost of getting it to us costs more. The cost of a loaf of bread costs more. If it costs more to fuel the truck that brought the bread to the store and took the wheat to the mill and all of those things. And a lot of people act like the only cost of energy is gasoline at the pump, but it's a lot more than that.
You're so right. So right now we are actually producing near record amounts of oil and natural gas in this country. And that's no thanks to President Biden. President Biden and numerous people in his administration have made it clear that long term they want to put fossil fuel companies out of business. The fact that we've actually seen this energy boom has acted to mitigate the inflationary flames. But sadly, we see the left wing promising to put fossil fuel companies out of business. And you mentioned all of those sectors of the economy that are dependent on energy. And another one is manufacturing. Part of the reason why our country isn't as competitive as it could be in manufacturing are that industrial electricity costs have risen, and they've risen in some states like California far more than other states. And this is completely in a self-imposed handicap. We have hundreds of years worth of natural gas, oil, and coal in this country. We could be the most competitive nation in the world in terms of industrial electricity costs, and we are not as competitive as we could be because we have places like California, Michigan, even in the past Texas, that have put in place these renewable energy mandates that have been ramping up the cost of electricity for industrial use for many years now. That must be reversed.
Joel, I don't understand why the Biden administration, they're boasting about the fact that we're producing record amounts of oil and gas. So why are we producing it under policies that are clearly hostile? I mean, very hostile toward the oil and gas industry. Why is the production up? And how come we're not seeing the dramatic effect of that production in our everyday cost?
Well, production is up because of private sector ingenuity. If you look at fracking, for instance, natural gas, that has allowed us to tap into the hundreds of years worth of reserve that are buried deep beneath the ground. That was not a government invention. That was a private sector invention. And much of that development has happened on private property. Now, up until the last few years, we also saw the federal government increasingly leasing public lands for more fracking and drilling and exploration. And unfortunately, from day one, the Biden administration has tried to torpedo those leases. Look at day one of the administration. The administration killed the Keystone XL oil pipeline that would safely transmit fossil fuels from Canada all the way to our Gulf of Mexico. It's a huge problem right now that we can produce more, but we have to rely on shipping it by rail instead of by pipeline. And furthermore, the signals that the Biden administration have sent to the fossil fuel industry tells them that, look, long term, your capital investments aren't going to pay off. Your investments in actually exploring these lands aren't going to pay off. It costs billions of dollars to explore and to drill, and it takes many years to recoup those investments. So when you have an administration today saying we want to long-term put you out of business, that means they're going to invest less than today. And that means that even if we have a friendly administration next year or 4 years from now, we are going to be paying the consequences of what this current Biden administration has done the past 4 years.
I got to do one more energy question because it relates to foreign policy. We were virtually starving Iran to death. We didn't have to bomb them. We were bankrupting them under Donald Trump and Mike Pompeo when he was Secretary of State because we put such harsh sanctions, and it made it impossible for the Iranians to sell oil. Therefore, they were hemorrhaging and they were hurting, and they couldn't fund Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis. Now they can fund it all, and we're seeing the consequences of that. Why did the Biden administration ease up on Iran and make them profitable again? You just mentioned that on day one, they cut the Keystone pipeline. They made it possible for Russia to begin to utilize more of their energy, made Iran more prosperous. A lot of us are scratching our heads. I may not be the smartest guy in the whole room, but I can figure out that just didn't work out real well for us. What was the motive behind with their actions?
It's such fecklessness. If the Biden administration thought that they could provide more than $30 billion to the Iranian regime by releasing frozen assets and by allowing them to export more oil. Well, it hasn't worked out so well. If you look at how Iran has increased their funding of Hamas, and you recall the massacre that happened in Israel just this last October, in part that was funded by Iran. If you look at Hezbollah, which is the terrorist entity based in Lebanon that continues to fire rockets, not just at military installations, but at civilian populations across Israel, murdering young children, that is funded by Iran. And if you look at the missiles that are being launched and the pirating that's occurring off the coast of Yemen, that's targeting not just Israeli ships, it's targeting our ships as well, risking lives, but also driving up our costs. That is also funded by Iran. And I am very thankful to hear the news today that strikes carried out by the Israeli Defense Forces have taken out multiple top terrorists that have long been funded by Iran. That was Israel that did that, and we owe them a debt of gratitude.
You know, the economy is uncertain. You never know whether your money's worth as much today as it was yesterday. It's one of the reasons I buy gold from American Hartford Gold. American Hartford Gold has earned a 5-star rating and an A+ from the Better Business Bureau. Be sure to tell them Mike Huckabee sent you. They'll give you up to $15,000 of free silver on your first qualifying order. Call 844-417-1010 or text Mike to 998899. You'll be glad you did business with American Hartford Gold.